Hi, and welcome to this online training course for social media strategy and content plan. My name is Sarah Orchard and I'm your trainer today. I am the creator of getfullybooked.com and I also run a holiday accommodation business. So what we're going to look at is we're going to look at setting a social media strategy. So why are you using social media? What objectives do you need to set so that you know whether your social media is actually working for you? How to pick the best platforms, what content to post, what time of day is best to post, and then how to see if all of this is working. Now, I've developed a workbook to go alongside this training video, so make sure that you grab the PDF and download that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through the sections of the strategy and plan document just to help you put together a social media strategy. So first of all, I think the first step is, why are you using social media? It's quite easy for us to get carried away and think that we have to be on every single social media platform. Maybe because we've seen other businesses doing it and we think we need to be on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook, and now we've got TikTok and Clubhouse. There are so many different social platforms to choose from. And I think I would always start with questioning, why are you using social media in the first place? And why is it important to your business? And that really is the starting point, is thinking about, what are you using social media for? Now, social media is very, very good for getting brand awareness. It's good for getting your name out there and for people to discover your tourism or hospitality business. But it's not the be all and end all, and it doesn't necessarily always convert people into paying customers or guests of visitors of your business. So we need to think about, when we're doing social media, what are we trying to achieve from that? And because people go through various steps when they're discovering our business, they go from that initial no awareness, and we have to make them aware. They have to have an awareness of our business. Then we have to attract them and create a certain amount of desire that they want to buy the experience or the service that we're offering. And then we have to convert them into a customer, and ultimately we have to get them to come back to our business again. So social media can be really, really useful at the sort of start of that customer journey and getting people to actually become aware of your business in the first place. So the first thing I'd ask you to do is to go to section 1 of the workbook and to look at setting your social media objectives. So again, what are you trying to achieve? So awareness is the first step, but are you also wanting to get, for example, a certain number of website visits to your business? Are you looking at taking people to a particular sales page on your website? Maybe you sell gift vouchers, or you have an online shop selling your product. Maybe now you do takeaways for your pub, for example. So are you trying to get people to a specific page or service that you offer? So in this section 1, it would be really good to write down the objectives. So for example, an objective might be to create more traffic to your website from social media with a minimum number of extra visits in the next 12 months. So you want to try and set objectives that are quite specific. We often refer to them as SMART. So they are specific, measurable, actionable, realistic, and time-bound, which means we have to give them some sort of parameters so that we actually know whether we've achieved them or not, say in 12 months' time. Another objective that you might have might be to get signups to your email list, for example. So you may want to start building your list so that you can start marketing direct to your customers, rather than actually relying on maybe an online travel agent or going through an intermediary who charges you commission for your business. So you might be wanting to try and get more people direct. Now, obviously, you can talk to people direct on social media, but ultimately, I do think it's better to try and get them onto your email list, because then you own that list. It's like getting them onto your website. You own your website, so you have control of the marketing and the messaging that takes place in that environment. So what I'd encourage you to think about is, if you're not sure about where sort of your website and email marketing fits in the bigger picture of all of your marketing activity, I've done 2 more training videos on those subjects, so you can take a look at those, and that will help you to get some ideas about where they fit in amongst sort of what you're doing with sort of social media. But for me, social media can be at the start of the funnel. So it's getting people aware of your business and getting them to come to your website, join your email list. So it's the very start of that journey, and it's making them aware of your business. But it'd be really good to get some objectives down that are specific about, how many, what are you trying to achieve, basically? So are you trying to get more website traffic? Are you trying to get more email signups? Are you trying to get more, dinner reservations in your restaurant? What are you ultimately as a business trying to achieve? And then the next step 2, is to think about who you're targeting. And one of the things that I think people struggle with is they go onto social media and they are talking to everyone. So they're not starting with a specific ideal customer, guest or visitor sort of in mind. And if you look in the workbook at section 2, one of the things I want you to think about is actually, who are you targeting? So if it helps, give them a name. Now, often we call these personas, but it's just a thought of giving that sort of, maybe think about maybe some of your best customers. So maybe you have regulars that come back and stay in your holiday accommodation, or regulars in your pub or your restaurant. So people who come back to your attraction with their family all the time, maybe give them that name and think about them. Think about your ideal customers that spend the most money with you. They're the most profitable. They're your sort of best fit. And start to think about them in terms of maybe their age. What typically are they? Are they a family? Do they have children? Are they couples? Do they come from a specific location typically? You might find that you have a set sort of drive time from your location that people come from. Do they have a certain income, sort of household income level, or sort of wealth? Do they have certain interests? Maybe they're dog walkers, or just walkers, or they're cyclists. Maybe you have a specific interest that draws them to your business. So if you were a dog-friendly accommodation or a pub that was dog-friendly, you may have that in the persona, so that will help you when you're doing targeting on social media. And particularly if you do advertising with social media, you will be able to use that as some of the criteria when you're trying to target them. Then think about their sort of motivations. The next section, we sort of look at what makes them want to buy your particular tourism or hospitality offering. Is it because they're coming for a special occasion? Maybe if you run a restaurant or a pub, and maybe if you do fine dining, for example, they're actually coming to you because they actually specifically want to celebrate a special occasion. Maybe they want to come because they want exercise. If you offer an activity, for example, or an experience like foraging, or any of those sorts of things, like cycling, it might be, or trying things like archery. They might be actually because they want to learn a new skill. They want to try something new. You're really trying to get into the sort of motivations of why they're making a purchase. And is it a more regular sort of, like with a pub or a restaurant, is it a more regular sort of weekly go out for a meal, or is it a special occasion? Because again, that will start to sort of shape what you put on social media in terms of the imagery and the language and the messaging that you put on there. And who do they consider in terms of purchasing? So do you have competitors, for example? Who's in your competitive set? Maybe looking at what they're doing on social media. If you go onto Facebook, and I cover this in the Facebook Insights training video, there's a way of watching your competitors on Facebook Insights so that you can see what they're posting and what their messaging is, and also how well those posts are doing. So that can be really, really useful when you're sort of looking at your competitors and working out what they're doing and who you're up against, really. Also in this section, I'd like you to start thinking about what influences their decisions. So what sources do they use in terms of their research? Now, this could also be, you know, do they get recommendations from friends? So if so, for example, like getting reviews on social media could be really important. Also asking people to share your content. So when you're posting, we often forget to ask people to share. So if recommendation is really important for your particular type of tourism or hospitality business, getting people to actually share that content on social can be really important. But at this stage, you're just trying to understand their sort of general behavior and how do they go about making a decision? Do they go on Google? Do they then find your website? Do they go to magazines or blogs to be influenced? So influencers might come in there. And what social media platforms do they actually use? And I'd encourage you to be really ruthless about not trying to be on every single social platform just because you feel like you should be, or because maybe your competitors are. You need to understand where your ideal customers are and which social media platforms they use. So for example, Instagram and TikTok are very young. Instagram is typically around 30s, TikTok is sort of 18 to 25, typically. So if you're appealing to 50-plus-year-old walkers with dogs, being on TikTok and Instagram, you might enjoy it and it might be fun, but that's not where you're going to find your customers. So you need to understand who uses which platform. For example, Twitter is used a lot by the small business community and by the media. So quite good for reaching out to media and influencers and journalists, not so good for getting direct business from end consumers, whereas Facebook could be much more powerful, or Instagram could be better for that. Same as with LinkedIn, you know, that's good maybe for doing partnerships and business to business, but when you're talking about end customers, it's not going to be so good for you. So it's worth just being quite ruthless and deciding which social platforms you should be on. And then we need to just think about those final things about what influences their purchase decision. Is it to do with how prestigious your brand feels? Could be it's the lowest cost. What might stop them from making a purchase with you? So there might be some buying hurdles that might stop them in terms of like recommendation, sort of like financial or reputation risk if they feel like they get the decision wrong. Probably if you're going to the pub and having a meal out, that's not going to be such a strong factor. But, you know, affordability might be something that comes into the equation. So it's really useful to go through that targeting exercise. And you may not just have one ideal customer, you may have 2 or 3 different personas. And therefore, when you're doing social posts, you'll be thinking about these people when you're actually posting your content. So the next step, when we look at section 3 of the workbook, is social media channels and picking the right platforms. And I've just mentioned a little bit about this. And I love this diagram because it's quite old now, but it's one of my favorites because it really does summarize the differences between the social media platforms, because they are all quite different. Now, TikTok's not on here because it's too new, and Clubhouse, but we'll ignore those for the moment because they're not going to be as relevant for most of you. But for example, Facebook is very much sort of a sense of community, so and your friendships. So what you're doing by saying you like something is it's like, I like, sorry, it's a Big Mac example for anyone who's vegetarian or vegan, but it is a good way of sort of describing this and bringing it to life. So I like my Big Mac. It's showing your affinity to a brand or to individuals. So like the friendships that you have on Facebook. Twitter for me is very much like it's like a live news feed. It's very quick, it's very buzzy. It's a bit like I'm eating my Big Mac right now. You're sort of telling people what you're doing. So it's very, very fast paced. And that's why, you know, journalists use it a lot for sort of putting out media requests to get leads and content for articles. And obviously reaching out to people like bloggers and influencers, it can work quite well on Twitter because it is very much about sort of being in the moment. LinkedIn, as I said, is a bit about my skills include eating a Big Mac. Now, LinkedIn's probably not going to be as relevant for you all, but it's more about your sort of your professional, so almost like your CV online. But it might be that from a networking point of view and business to business and maybe building relationships with other hospitality and tourism businesses, you might want to have a LinkedIn profile, but just for you as a business owner, but you wouldn't be getting your end consumers buying what you offer, particularly from LinkedIn, but it could be quite good from a sort of professional networking point of view. YouTube is, this is how I eat my Big Mac. So there's a lot of how-to videos. I mean, YouTube is a video search engine. So people go on there, it's owned by Google, and people go on there to look for how to do things. So if you offered, for example, an activity like archery or cycling, you might put some tips on there about how to, mountain bike in a certain area, or how to do X, Y, and Z. And people may find that and find your brand that way. So YouTube takes a bit of imagination in terms of how to use it, but frequently asked questions and how to sort of stuff is very, very big on YouTube. We go on there for, there's other sort of inspirational creative stuff, but actually a lot of people go on there to find out how to do stuff. So YouTube is very much like, this is how I eat my Big Mac, and you're showing people. So you could use it to bring your business to life in terms of showing behind the scenes and what's going on in your business. That's another way of using video to do that. Instagram, the description is, here is a classic picture of my Big Mac. Now, Instagram is very much about its sort of beautiful pictures. It's very curated content. So if you're using Instagram, you have to think about the audience being predominantly in the sort of millennial 30-somethings. And your grid and your feed that you have on Instagram needs to look quite styled and organized. So having lots of behind the scenes, quite rough and ready pictures can look quite messy on Instagram, and is unlikely to get engagement from people and get people excited about your brand. So how I tend to think about it is, I tend to use Facebook for the behind the scenes, more real life, what's going on in my business. And then I use my holiday business and my accommodation business as a treehouse. And then I use Instagram to show the more beautiful, styled, aspirational pictures of sort of being in that property. So I segment what I'm putting onto the different platforms according to knowing my audience and knowing what they want to see on that platform and what they're going to engage with. Obviously, a blog is about describing an experience, and that's very good for SEO. And there's 2 videos on thinking like Google and SEO, and also blogging, 2 separate videos in this training series that is also really useful to have a look at, to talk about blog. I'm not going to cover blogging in a lot of detail here, but it is a good way of getting visibility for your website and for your business. But we're not going to go into too much detail on that now. Pinterest, a recipe to make your own Big Mac. So Pinterest is really good for travel, lifestyle topics like gardening, home decor, recipes and cooking, parenting. It's very female orientated. It's about 80% female, quite young, 25 to sort of 40. Again, it's a visual search engine. So if you think about YouTube being the video search engine, Pinterest is the image search engine equivalent. So people go on there actively looking for inspiration. So if you have a holiday cottage or you're a wedding venue, weddings is a really big category on Pinterest. It's a really good platform to use. And you can also use it, for example, to link back to a blog. So you could create an image and pin that in Pinterest and take people back to a blog article, which might be about wedding styling tips if you're a wedding venue, for example. So there's lots of creative ways that you can use Pinterest, but it's very much about showing people a visual, sort of inspirational image. And the last one we've got there is Foursquare, which has sort of died a death a little bit now, because I was saying this graphic is a little bit old, but that was about location marketing. So it was like, this is where I'm actually eating my Big Mac. So what I've put together in the workbook is, a summary of the different types of social media platform and what are they best for. So what I'd ask you to do is to go through, there's a grid, and we've got basically the social media channels, and we've got which ones are good for brand building, which ones are good for website traffic, for signups or for SEO. and you can give them a priority score. And you can score them from sort of high to low in terms of which ones you think are the best for you, the best fit for those ideal customers that we talked about at the beginning, and your objectives as a business. So you're revisiting sections 1 and sections 2, where you were thinking about why you were doing social media in the first place, and also who your audience is. And then you can prioritize these so that you'll get a bit of a weighting as to which one you will actually, which ones you'll use in your business, and maybe which ones you'll rule out. So will you rule out, you know, for example, like we talked about TikTok being very sort of 18-year-olds, you know, 18, 20-year-olds, and it's video content, and, you know, that may not be right for your business. So the idea in this section is actually to start to prioritize which social platforms you're going to focus on. One thing I wanted to just talk about was influencers and how important influencers are. Don't get me wrong, particularly on Instagram, influencers can be very, very influential to get your brand out there. But I think you have to be very careful if you choose to work with some influencers, because there's a lot of people who've got very large followings on social media. Some of them have bought that following, it's not genuine. And I think what you have to bear in mind is you have to look at how many followers they have, how many posts they've done, but also look at how much engagement they've got. So what you need to do is look back at maybe the last 10 posts and actually look at how many interactions they've had in terms of comments and likes, you know, the love hearts on their actual posts. Because if you've got a very big following, but they're not very engaged, if you pay money, which you will ultimately have to do to work with an influencer, they don't work with you for free. Most of them charge between a couple of £100 and several £1,000s, depending on how big their following is. Some of them charge, you know, tens of thousands of pounds, but you can work with some sort of small to medium influencers for around about £300 to sort of £500 to do a sort of collaboration, as they call it, where you might actually, they might come and visit your location. They might then write a blog post and do some social, you know, some Instagram stories and a post on their actual grid. You need to be very careful that you agree what the deliverables are so that you know what you're paying for. But just be mindful, because I've paid for some influencer activity for my own business and found that I had very little traction with it, in terms of I got a few likes on the post and a few extra follows, but I don't think I got any, you know, I didn't get any huge number of bookings from it. So sometimes there's other better sort of activity, and it might be that, for example, like a Facebook advert would be a better investment of your budget than getting carried away with influencers. So it is, you know, everyone's talking about influencers, and it can feel quite sort of like, oh, I need to work with an influencer. And sometimes little micro influencers that might be very local people, depending on your business, can be really, really useful for you. So don't think that you have to go for the biggest ones out there to actually get some benefit from it. You could actually go for sort of smaller local micro influencers who've got a really good engagement with the local community, and that could actually get you more business than actually going for a really big national influencer who you might just get a few likes and that's about it, really. So it could be a waste of your time and your limited budgets. So as I said, what I'd like you to do is then work through, this is my little chart, so you can work through and prioritize which, based on all that information, which social platforms you're going to focus on to achieve your objectives for your particular customers. And again, you know, you may need to use all of these, or you may find that actually only one or two. For example, for my treehouse business, I only use Instagram and Facebook. I am looking at using Pinterest a little bit, but actually all of the others are sort of irrelevant for my audience and my objectives. So I'm being quite focused about what I work on, because actually we all have limited time. So if we try and do too many things, we spread ourselves too thinly, and then we find it very difficult to keep up with all this social media activity. So it's better to be really, really focused, know who our audience is, and actually prioritize what we're doing from a social point of view. So now in section 4 and 5 it's time to set some social media, what we call KPIs. So this is like, how are we going to know whether, well, KPIs are key performance indicators. So it's a bit of a jargon, but it just means we need to set some little mini targets in terms of what we're doing. So in section 4, I've asked you to write down what your current social performance is. So obviously, if you're new and you've only just started, you're not going to have any figures here, but you're going to set some objectives. But if you've been maybe using like Facebook and Instagram for a while, what I want you to do is to write down the date and actually write down how many followers you have on each platform. So maybe you've got 1,000 likes on Facebook and 500 people following you on Instagram. Write down how many posts you've done. And then in section 5, I'd like you to write down some targets. So based on what you've set as your objective. So if you've said that you want to, for example, increase your website traffic, you're going to need to get, and you've only got 1,000 people following you on Facebook, you're probably going to need a lot more people following you on Facebook. So maybe your target for your Facebook growth in a year might be to double it. It might be to go from 1,000 to 2,000, or if you're starting out, it might be just to get 500 likes on Facebook. But you won't know whether you've actually made any progress in terms of your social media strategy if you don't set some targets at this stage in terms of setting some objectives, in terms of measuring how well you're doing. So for each of those platforms that you prioritized, write down how many likes or followers you want to have, maybe how many posts you're going to do, and we'll come on to talk about how frequency of posting and what's recommended. But start to just put some figures down and commit to them, because then every month you can sort of measure your progress against your objectives, because otherwise you can be doing all this activity and not really knowing whether it's working or not. Okay, so in section 6 of the workbook, we need to work out the best time to post. And this is a really interesting, and we're going to get onto sort of content next. So now we've gone from the sort of setting our objectives and working out where we're going to focus our time and energy on social media. We're now starting to think about the practicalities of making it happen in terms of when to post, what type of content to post, and actually putting it into place, really. So in section 6, some thoughts about the best time to post. So you can use insights within both Instagram and Facebook to work out the best time to post. So if you go and look at my Facebook and Instagram insights training video, I show you with some live screen share where to find that. But basically you can go into your insights and click on posts, and you'll be able to see the best times of day. Actually in Facebook it's on people. Being able to work out the best time of day when your audience is online. So for example, I tend to find on Facebook and Instagram round about 7:30, 8 o'clock at night is the best time to post. But for Twitter, that's not the case. So for Twitter, you can use a tool called Twiriad, which you put your account in, and it then analyzes all of your followers and what time they are most online for Twitter. So that can be really useful to work out what time of day you're actually going to do your post. So you've thought about what you want to try and achieve, what channels you're using, and now you're thinking about, okay, what time of day am I going to start putting my posts out, and how frequently should I be posting? And that's another question that I get asked a lot. So I tend to post on Instagram every other day. The best practice is that they say you should post daily. On Facebook, because of the way that the algorithm works now, I'd say that you should be aiming for between 3 and 5 posts a week on Facebook. I aim for about 3. It's quality, not quantity. So you shouldn't just be pumping out posts several times a day, because you'll start to annoy people. And also the way that the algorithms work is they look at how much engagement you get from your audience. So if you start putting a lot of content out there and it's sort of falling on deaf ears and no one's interacting with it or commenting or sharing it, you will find that you'll get less and less reach, and you'll get almost like penalized. So it's really good to keep your posts at an optimal sort of level at the right time of day for your audience, but make sure that you don't put out rubbish. So you want to be putting out quality content, because the more interactions that you get, the better your reach will be. So you will get more visibility on Facebook and Instagram than if you put out lots of rubbish. So you're better off putting out less posts and getting better interaction, what we call engagement, because then you will get a bigger reach and you'll get more bang for your buck in terms of your efforts on social media. So that's probably the main platforms. Pinterest, again, evenings is sort of better than daytime. And it sort of makes sense that it's when people are actually having time to look at it. So like Facebook and Instagram, people tend to look in the evening. Maybe they've had their meal and they maybe put the kids to bed, and they're not working. So they've got time to just sit and maybe look at a social platform. So obviously you want to try and optimize your chances of being seen. So it's better to post at the right time. So section 7 of the workbook, I've given you a table with, and I just pulled out a few examples here, but I've given you a table, a matrix of lots of different content ideas, because again, even when you've worked out what platforms that you're going to be using, people get very concerned about, well, how am I going to come up? I haven't got enough images, and how am I going to come up with good content to put out on social? Well, I've come up with 50 ideas in this matrix just to get you started, and you can add to this. This is not a definitive list, but it gives you a flavor of the different ideas. And for each of these, you could think about them producing them in different ways. So they could be text-based on a colored background. They could be an image. They could also be a video. Or if you're using Instagram, it could be a story, with Facebook as well, a story. It could be a reel. You've got IGTV, on Instagram, you've got guides. So there's lots of different ways of taking these content ideas and actually turning them into lots of different content. So this 50 ideas, if you imagine they could be done in 3 ways, that's 150 ideas to go out on social media, which if you're posting every other day, that's a year's worth in one go. So it gives you a bit of a starter. So I've just pulled out here on the screen 3 examples, but if you look in the workbook in section 7, you'll see that there's a matrix for you to refer to. So things like meet a team member. So that could be a written profile. They could be in a blog, for example, because you could have written a blog on your website with meet each of your team members. Maybe it's your kitchen crew if you run a restaurant or a pub. People love to know the people that are behind a business. We sort of forget and think, oh, we can't really talk about them. Even if you've got a dog that's like the office dog, the site dog, people love to know about what's going on behind in your business, especially if you're a small business and you're independent. People love that stuff. So don't be afraid to sort of give a bit of personality and the people behind the story, really, of your business. So meet a team member could be a blog post. It could be a short talking to video, like to camera, if you can get staff members brave enough to do it. It could just be a headshot, a photograph of them doing their job. They don't even have to be looking at the camera if they're camera shy, if they're a chef or they're front of house staff or they're cleaning staff or they're, a groundsman working on your business if you've got like an attraction. Take a picture of them doing their job and maybe tell a little bit about how, they've ended up doing what they're doing, because that helps to build your brand personality and makes really nice, interesting content. People are more likely to interact with that. I've done some posts in the past for a hotel client where we sort of profiled each of their kitchen crew, and those posts got really good engagement and interaction because it's people, and people like to know who's working behind the scenes in the kitchen that they don't see. So that could be really, really, good content. And there we've got several different ways of presenting it. So it doesn't just have to be a photograph. It can be all of those different ways, like video or static. Could be a quote from them, and then you link to the blog post, or just link to an about page on your website, for example. The second one I've given you here as an example is a behind the scenes video. Now, we all have, okay, can't really see it because it's not showing on my background, but we have smartphones. Yeah, we all have these things in our pockets, and they have really good video cameras on them. They take great pictures too. And if you're doing a video for your homepage of your website, yes, it needs to look professional and it needs to look slick. But if you're doing a video for social media, it doesn't have to be. So if you do things like Reels, for example, on Instagram, you can take little short clips of video and you can put it together with backing music and you can make it into a really, really exciting, interesting reel that will get you in front of a lot of people. But you can do little behind the scenes videos that actually help to bring your business to life. Maybe they're behind the scenes, what goes on a day-to-day basis. They could be that you're working on a project. Maybe you're having a project like a landscaping project or something new being developed at your location. Maybe your pub garden's being done up, or you're having something built in the garden for people to eat outdoors. You know, people like to see the story being told about what's going on behind the scenes in the, you know, in your business. So again, that could be photographs, that could be video, it could be, you know, reels or IGTV. There's lots of different ways of bringing, and stories I think are great for, if you've not done Facebook or Instagram stories, they're a great way of quickly creating something that's quite fun and engaging to sort of tell that behind the scenes story of what's going on. The third one I've picked out here is like our top 10, and I've called it menu dishes, but this could be anything. This could be, if you've got a holiday business, it could be the top 10 local dog walks. It could be the top 10 local best pubs to go to, or 5, it doesn't have to be 10. But, you know, our top 10 menu dishes, if you ran a pub or a restaurant, could be like, what are your guests' favorites? And again, this could be a video, it could be, you could create like a graphic, maybe with like a top 10 sort of looking graphic, or you could use a photograph of maybe your top selling dish. It's a great way of showcasing what you do and bringing that to life. So that matrix is literally just a snapshot of 50 ideas of content. So I don't think you'd ever be stuck. And there's also things like National Awareness Days, like what's on locally, how to do something, fly on the wall. You know, customer FAQs can be a really good way of coming up with content. The questions that you get asked all the time by your customers can be really good content for social media, because if they're asking it, you can guarantee that other people will be asking it too, and it's really good for blog content as well. So once you've actually come up with your content ideas, you've worked out, if we just recap, we've sort of looked at what we're trying to achieve. We've looked at who our ideal customers are and worked out which social platforms they're on. We've prioritized which social platforms we're going to use. And we've set ourselves some targets in terms of, we want to grow our following by X amount within a certain time period. We want to get so many maybe email signups or website visits as a result of our social activity. Maybe you'll set a target that you want to get so much of your website traffic from social media. So it could be 10% or 15%. So you'll be setting yourself a specific objective around that. You've thought about what time you're going to post and how frequently. And now you're starting to think about the content ideas. And the ideal thing to do is to pull this together into a 3-month plan, so that you have a 3-month plan of activity. I don't think you can plan, people say like create a 12-month plan. That's a lot of content to create. And some of the best, I remember hearing a saying that said the best social media doesn't happen in the office. You know, the best social media content is about you taking pictures and video and stuff when you're out in your business, which is why I think it's quite difficult to outsource your social media content effectively, because ultimately you do need people in your business. You need it to be sort of the real life of what's going on in your business. So, you know, by outsourcing it, it's really, really difficult for someone else, because they don't work in your business. So they don't see all this stuff going on a day-to-day basis. And if you keep it quite focused and structured, and you use some of the things that I've showcased in the other videos, like using insights, using things like Business Suite to schedule your posts, you can make your social media activity quite manageable, so that you can sit down for maybe like an hour every week maximum, and you could schedule a series of posts to go out, and then your activity would be done. So there might be a little bit of interacting, you know, in terms of comments and responding to things on a daily basis, but actually it sort of takes away a lot of the daily pressure of doing social media. So I'd encourage you to think about actually mapping out 3 months worth of activity. And you can do this on a bit of paper, you can do it in a Word document, you could do it in Excel, whatever's your weapon of choice. Could be a big whiteboard, and you could just write out some themes, maybe some awareness days that are relevant for you, and maybe some of these content ideas, and then it will give you an idea. And even if you planned out a month at a time, it just means that you're more likely to make it actually happen. So as I said, social media works best with a plan. So create that 3-month plan. As a minimum, create a monthly plan. So we're thinking about a month ahead, maybe about the seasons, what's going on in your business, any like national awareness days that you can sort of piggyback off the back of, national holidays like Valentine's, and you know, there's lots of different things that we can sort of use as hooks for our social media content, but get it down in an actual plan, because then it's more likely to happen. What I've also put in the workbook, on the final page, you'll find a page of extra resources. So this is my sort of social media, it's like secret sauce, really. It's all of the things that I use to make my life easier in terms of social media, in terms of maybe like knowing what image sizes to use, where to get free images, because there's quite a few websites where you can get free images. Please don't take images from Google, because they belong to somebody, and if you start using them, you'll be infringing the copyright, and that is an offense, and you can be fined. And some of the big companies, if you use images from people like Getty, they will come after you for a fee if you use the image and you haven't paid for it. So please be really careful. There's lots of good places like Unsplash and Pixabay where you can go and get free images. Obviously, taking your own is always the best, because you own them and you can use them to your heart's content. I've also put some there in the resources, I've put some tools for creating graphics and quotes, and also video makers as well. There's some really good apps that are good for creating little videos from photographs and clips by adding music. There's one called Unfold for Instagram, which is really, really good. And I've used one called Quick from GoPro, which is really good for creating really snazzy little videos. So they're just a few tools to help you with your social media content and putting it together, and hopefully making life a bit easier. So that's in section 9 and the final page of your workbook. So thank you for listening to this training session. I hope you found it really useful. And as I said, there's several other videos in the series. So make sure you check those out. And thank you for watching.